Hello, this is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network every Thursday at 1 p.m. And you can also find me on the Conscious Resistance Network and the Conscious Resistance YouTube channel. So today we have Jaime Sherman, who's an anarchist and a founder of the Voluntarist comic book series. Really awesome comic book series regarding just talking about voluntarism against the state and cool things like that.
Absolutely.
The first one I've seen, it seems like you guys are unique in your field, right?
Oh yeah, there's no, as far as I've seen, I mean, I've done a bit of searching, but I've never seen anybody who's put libertarianism at the forefront of a comic universe. It just hasn't been done. Sure, other comics have kind of had it underlying. You think of Alan Moore and Watchmen and V for Vendetta. He's a philosophical anarchist.
Yeah.
But there's nothing out there that really assumes that to be the premise, assumes the principles of liberty as the norm that the reader is supposed to connect with.
Yeah. I was just going to mention the Watchmen. That's one thing that my brother really loves. That was a comic book series, right? Before it was a movie, right?
Yeah, considered like a graphic novel.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my brother's big time into that stuff. So when I told him about I showed him your website. He was like, "Wow, it's awesome!"
That's awesome. Glad he loves liberty too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm slowly introducing him to the concepts. He's got a lot of the same questions. How would this happen? How would that happen?
Sure.
Right? So it takes a lot of explanation. Got to break down the status barriers in your mind, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about you. How did you become an anarchist? Your background.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's something that happened over time. I think, kind of like most people, unless you're born feeling that way, I think a lot of people take time during their lives to start to think about things, and usually something sets that off. For me, what set me off was my American government history class in college, where I was discussing and learning about the American eugenics movement, and I hadn't learned about that before. And it made me think, okay, what else haven't I learned about American history? And that caused me to start to spend a couple of years researching and looking back in time and kind of approaching everything I believed. And I think that led from one thing to another. First, starting to see the state as being a real problem and an evil, and starting to go down the path of libertarianism, and then eventually working into the philosophy of things and coming to my ethical maxims, and reading some stuff with, Lysander Spooner and Marc Stevens, and thinking about, should goods and services of any sort be provided at the barrel of a gun. I kind of had to just take that little bit of leap of intellectual faith and just say, well, if I'm going to be logically consistent, I'm not at the consequences yet. I'm not thinking about the how or the why, but if I'm going to be logically consistent, I have to admit, okay, at a base level, if I believe in consent and I believe in true liberty, that has to go all the way to the individual. And then after that, you kind of have to figure out, well, what's next? And so that kind of took place in my mind about over the course of 3 years.
3 years. Oh, yeah, that's what they say, right? With the transition from a minarchist to an anarchist, right?
Yeah.
So
Minarchist to anarchist goes a lot quicker than the first, going from loving the state or thinking the state's, okay for certain things to, okay, maybe the state is actually overall bad and there isn't really a good part of it, and a lot of people go with it's a necessary evil thing, and that kind of bent of mine. But
necessary evil, right?
Yeah,
you have to pick one. You have to pick one, right?
Yeah, because the political parties and so on. But.
Yeah. Actually, what you said before about that, it started in your history class. So I assume you went through, high school, right? Or the regular government school that we all went through. Right?
I didn't actually. I went through all private schools before
okay.
to my undergrad institution, which was public, as well as my graduate institution.
So how many years was it public or private, you said?
Everything from 1st through 12th grade was all in private schools, various private schools.
Cool. All right. So then you don't have so much of a state slant as most people do, right? I guess.
Certainly, yeah, not necessarily a worshipfulness of the state or feeling like what else is out there. Obviously, I had that concept, and that came, that was a bit of conservatism, you could say. Before then, I would have considered myself probably a mainline Republican, and in practice, maybe more of a neocon. But when it came to the economic side, I understood liberty. I always have been an entrepreneur, naturally, selling lemonade or candies on the corner as a kid, and do whatever you could to make money. And so to me, I always intimately understood the concept of free marketism as far as being able to see this is what happens when you stop somebody from doing that. I mean, funny story. I don't know if I've ever told this before, but on an interview. But when I was a kid, I was in middle school, and I got in trouble with the school for selling smoke balls in school. I found out that I could go across to the CVS, buy smoke balls for $2.50 and sell them for $5 at school, and so I started selling them. Yeah, and by the end of the week, I made like $80, and then I got in trouble. But fortunately, back then, especially, it wasn't as bad of a thing. And in being a private school, of course, there's not police involvement. Now today, you look at public schools, you look at what's going on. I mean, and the no tolerance for anything schools, it's scary. I could have definitely been in much bigger trouble, had my life ruined in some ways because of that. And it's scary to think how much school prevents entrepreneurial thinking, especially if you're in public school. But any kind of school, like they really don't want you to use that as an opportunity for the marketplace. So.
Did you hear about the recent article about these kids in Great Britain? That this one kid, he made like £15,000. Did you hear about that?
Was he the one who was bringing in candy to school? Yeah. I was like, yeah, that's someone right after my own heart. Exactly.
Yeah, and he was making so much money, he had to employ another kid, and he was having a great. Little business going on, and of course they had to, shut him down, send him to detention, say, don't be starting your own business. That's not what we're teaching here.
It's downright terrifying, and the funny part is it's so natural for entrepreneurs to be there because you're like, I'm in this forced environment, I'm around my peers, I tend to know what they like because I'm one of them, right? And it's just natural. If you're an entrepreneur and you're that age, you're like, hey, my friends would probably like this, or I would like this. I bet you they'd like it too. And they stifle it. They try to prevent anybody from selling anything that's not school approved or for some school fundraiser, and it's absolutely terrible. Terrifying, terrible. Sorry, just combine those two words. It's a new word now.
That's the that's the idea of being an entrepreneur, right? You see a niche or you see a demand that's not being fulfilled, and then you move to fill it, and
right.
Lo and behold, you have a successful business, right? That's the epitome of a successful business model, right?
Right, finding needs and fulfilling people's wants.
Yeah. Oh yeah, basic economics.
Yeah.
So tell me how how you got inspired to start your voluntarist comic book.
Sure. So I've always been involved with comic fandom and cosplay at some level throughout my whole life. I've always been nerdy in that way. Played Star Wars role playing games, stuff like that. But when I was in undergrad a bit and then leading to law school, I started to think about how liberty and my interests would intersect, and I started off with creating these, kind of like real-life superhero characters that would dress up, and I would dress up in this costume and like go and hold up signs to wake people up to liberty. But then down the road, I thought, okay, how do I take this to the next level? How do I make this something that is, a culture medium? And it was my, basically the summer, I guess you could say, when I was studying for my bar exam, I decided that I wanted to create some sort of movie or film because I had a background in that, and so I started to do some fleshing out of details, doing some background writing. And I realized by the end of it, man, to make this quality kind of production, it's going to take too much money. So I said, okay, well, what could I do that I could reasonably do with a quality outcome? And comics was the next thing. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And so I started to finish up the background story and adjust it for a comic kind of portrayal, and just ran with it. From there on out, I just said, okay, friends and family, let's see what we can raise, and I just kept going with it.
Wow. Very nice. So you like draw all the figures, the comics, and everything, and you do the plot yourself?
No, I don't do the primary what's called pencils and inking. I work with other artists who do that. My forte is more in graphic design and the background story writing, web design, stuff like that. So what I do is I'll create storyboards, write the backstory, do sketches of figures, and work with other artists. And so, yeah, there'll be points where I'm involved with that work. If we're working back and forth, I know how to use Photoshop well and Illustrator, so I can sit there, adjust things, move things, change colors, which I have, for different issues if I want to get something a little bit different or add a little something. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of tweaking or sometimes lettering, doing that type of mock-up. But no, I work with other people because with every stage, and this is typical in the comic creation process, you usually have someone who does all those things separately. You usually have someone who's doing pencils, someone else is doing ink, someone else is doing flats for colors, then the actual coloring, then someone else is doing lettering. It usually is a several-person process. It's pretty rare that you can have somebody who can do it all at once without floundering in some little bit of an area. People tend to have niche skills in that, and the best way to get somebody, or the best way to get a quality production is to get somebody for each stage who is talented at that.
Yeah, definitely. Division of labor, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And that's how it works in comic books or
Awesome.
creating figures and stuff like that, whatever
Yeah.
it is.
So how, like, are you able to pay these people, or is it just
Mhm.
like a hobby, or for now, or how far have you come right now?
Oh yeah, all of it's paid. Initially I put in some of my own seed money to get it going, and then got people to fundraise through the Indiegogo campaigns. Same thing happens in each one. Usually, what happens is I put down a little bit of money to get something produced, so people see the direction, and then other people see the direction that I'm going, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this is gonna be cool," and then they continue to fund it. So that's usually how it works. I help create the campaigns, create some of the base imagery, work with artists to do that, put a little bit of money that way. Then I have something to show, and then people say, "Oh, I see where you're going," and they get on board more readily because that foundation's been laid. So yeah, everybody who is works in the comic, I don't do stuff for. Nobody's ever done anything for the comic that has been unpaid as far as any artwork or anything like that. There's always, and that's really what you have to. If you want quality work, you have to you have to pay people. It's easier now more than ever because of the internet, and there's so many ways you could hire artists through different channels.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want quality and you want professionalism, definitely need to be able to pay artists.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like high quality stuff, and it really looks good. So you have the second issue is about the TSA, right? And
This is technically the third full production for an issue, so this would be the third issue in print.
okay.
The second one that was fully completed was Voluntaryist versus State of Zombies,
Okay.
and the first one is called issue number 1, and now it's called issue number 1 special edition because it's a compilation of like the first and the second fundraisers and those materials. But the one with the TSA, yeah, it's Voluntaryists versus the TSA, so kicking TSA butt. I tried to launch it at a time when everybody's thinking about flying. Holidays, right?
Really? Oh, I see.
Right, exactly. People are thinking about going to see family over, whatever it was, from Thanksgiving to Hanukkah to Christmas to whatever, New Year's. Everybody's flying. People are starting to think about travel. So I wanted to have it kind of be a little bit relevant, so people, are remembering, oh man, the TSA is killing us, 1 hour at a time, or trying to grab our junk.
Yeah.
So it's something that I've always wanted to do something on, and I actually my grad thesis, I did a paper on the TSA and why they should be dismantled. So.
Oh, you really? Oh, okay. So you wrote a good. All right, awesome. So
yeah, I wrote a legal thesis on it.
awesome. Oh, so wait. So you were studying law, or
I was, yeah. I graduated with a law degree, and I'm a licensed lawyer, attorney. But I don't usually use it for practicing for others. I kind of hate the court system, obviously.
Yeah. So
I like legal academia. I like informing people of their rights and helping people think through those issues. But personally, I hate kissing the butts of judges and dealing with annoying prosecutors and so on and so forth. So I try to use the legal knowledge for helping people protect themselves and for just keeping up to date with the academic side of things.
So what do you do? I assume this is not your primary income.
The comic, no.
Yeah.
This is literally, I know it surprises some people, but I'm like, yeah, this is just a hobby. Like, this is something I do in my little bit of spare time.
Yeah.
But I do put my heart and soul into it. It's just, I wish it was my full time. Hey, who knows? Maybe one day it will be.
Yeah.
But no, I just see it with love because it's a project of love. But no, the main thing I do to bring in the money is I teach and tutor. So I teach multitude of classes, everything from a Cambridge international program to SAT and ACT course preparation, and so on and so forth. Teach a lot with mathematics as well.
Awesome. Okay. So I guess you're familiar with a lot of Marc Stevens' work, right?
Yeah, I am. I like a lot of what he has to say, especially as to thinking about how to make the state prove every element for the venue that you're in. You're in a criminal court. Yes, they do actually have to prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt, and that includes jurisdiction. Now, do all the things that Stevens says actually work out in court? No, there's some things where he goes beyond, and I think maybe his bias is that he thinks about California courts too much and the common law. But yeah, I mean, he is good for some things, but some stuff it's just, sorry, that's not the case. It's not gonna, kick it out of court.
So, like, for example, what kinds of cases is it not applicable?
I would say that some of his perspectives about how you argue certain substantive portions of the law, I don't have the specifics to me. I'd have to look it up. This is something that I've looked up in the past. But if we have a specific thing, happy to talk about it. But from the gist of when I read up a lot on him, is that it's the substantive law that's a little bit more unique to California. In certain states where they have a larger reliance on common law and they have very activist courts like California does, you can push a little bit more. Whereas if you have a state like Florida and you have a strong body of laws through the statutes and the Constitution, common law is still in the background, but it's not as easy to just push over the court system on certain types of arguments. But I think that his work as far as making the state have to prove everything beyond a reasonable doubt is definitely good. I mean, he tries to play some like legal language games with judges and like trying to get them to commit to positions and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't legally work. Just because a judge says something doesn't mean that overrides what the law is. That kind of thing. Yeah, you can make the judge contradict himself and feel flustered, but is that what was ruled on, the substantive law part? Not necessarily. But it's good. It's good stuff to think about.
Have you read any of his books?
Like Adventures in Legal Land?
Yeah.
I like snippets of it.
Okay.
So more so watched his videos, read his articles on his website, that kind of stuff, where I could sit there and skim through it and read.
Yeah. I don't know if you checked it out, but I interviewed him, and it was fascinating because he really comes at it from a different perspective. Like there's not many volunteers that actually go head on in the courts, directly with the judges and lawyers.
Yeah. There are plenty of voluntarist lawyers out there. I do know quite a few of them. Being in the legal field, yes. Okay. And I know that in high positions as well, positions in government with power, there are out there. But if you were to ask the actual lawyers, how do things work as far as what is actually accepted in substantive law, and I say substantive, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but when I say substantive, I'm not talking about the procedures of how you proceed with the case and process, the typical things like you think about when you have to file and the form of the paper that you have to file. I'm talking about the law itself. What have judges said about the law? What is the history of the law? So on and so forth. So, when it comes to the substantive stuff, there's a lot less wiggle room as far as pushing back than people would like to think. Mm-hmm. At least in appellate court history. Mm-hmm. But sometimes people can trip up the state on the procedure, and that's enough, and they'll get out of it based on the procedure. So
I'm sure you heard about Marc Victor.
Marc Victor rings a bell, but I'm not sure.
He's I think he calls himself like the freedom lawyer or something like that. He's basically a constitutionalist lawyer. He just he's pretty strict with the Constitution, which I guess if you're a lawyer, that's the farthest you can go. Like somebody like Marc Stevens can't consider himself a lawyer because he's like completely outside of the spectrum.
If he's not actually licensed to practice, then he's not legally a lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, just the way he does it, like that would never pass for a lawyer. But like I guess for Marc Victor, he sticks. I think he sticks for the most part to the Constitution, which I guess is considered the basics, right? The complete basic, rudimentary, provision of rights. Would you say?
For America, going to the Constitution, but the Constitution isn't going to be enough alone. Obviously, you need all the different opinions that have been handed down. You have to analyze those things. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that's considered. How the Constitution is literally written versus the interpretations. They're just two different worlds. If you read John Hasness's article, he's a Georgetown professor. He also, I think, he graduated at Duke Law. He writes very well in a law review article about the myth of the rule of law. That's the best article example you can have of why the rule of law is actually a myth, because there is no rule of single law. There's a whole bunch of different judges' interpretations. There is majority and dissenting opinion. You can't get 9 people to totally agree on anything really of importance. It's very rare that you get a 9-0 on a Supreme Court case. So the point there is, there isn't really a rule of law. There's just a bunch of different decisions in different jurisdictions, and they're always competing and always fluxing and changing. And it's a crazy, crazy world. Marc Stevens would agree with that one.
So do you find Marc Stevens uses the logical fallacies a lot when he's in court? And he that's basically the way that he kind of catches people in their contradictions. Would you say that that's a useful tactic to use in court? Of course, if you're not a lawyer.
It depends. It's one of those things where it's like a lot of times people who do those kinds of things, they end up just kicking out. It's like, oh, what are you here for? Oh, a $75 ticket. Well, it's going to cost the court $500 to have all the different people, in service the amount of time that you're sitting there trying to, give them a hard time. So the judge would be like, all right, we don't have time for this, or I want to go see a football game, right? And so they dismiss it, but that didn't mean, oh, you have a ruling in favor of the substantive law. It just means, wow, we don't really want to deal with this person. Them having to come to court is enough of a punishment. We're done. And that happens a lot, especially with small stuff and people that want to, be the people that push the issue and keep on grinding at the wheel there. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely trip up the state on issues and make them, hold them on every single issue that they have to prove whatever system that you're in. If you're in criminal, then beyond a reasonable doubt. Civil, then you have a much lower standard with preponderance. But especially if you're in the criminal system, okay, well, you do have to make this. You can make the state, and they do have to prove then each element of the crime, including up to jurisdiction, so on and so forth. And they may not be prepared for that. They may have not thought to prepare for that, and that can trip them up. And so that happens. And then
I assume most of the cases that he takes on are not like like the basic crimes, theft, murder, rape, things like that. Most of the stuff he takes on is victimless crimes, right? Drug possession and moving violations, parking violations. Yeah,
and it's in California, which is its own kangaroo court. As far as, I mean, there's so much in California that they just overrule statutes like crazy over there. I mean, that's why everybody files their civil lawsuits in California when they do class action, because California is so generous at moving the goalposts when it comes to policy things. So it's a tough call there, and especially if you're just in civil court where things are a bit more wily. There's a lot of little minutiae rules that you can get tripped up on, sure, But for the average person who's going to court on a typical thing, there's probably, in your state, you're probably in a place where they have express rules about certain things, and it could be dangerous to try to do it alone. It could be potentially dangerous, especially if you're in one of those crazy states. You think of like the traffic light tickets, and they try to say, oh, if you try to contest this and you lose, now we get to expand the fine up from 150 to like 300 now. I mean, and those need to be constitutionally challenged. But again, is the person who's going up prepared to do that? Probably not.
Yeah. Probably. So what would happen? Like if I had a moving violation, speeding ticket, let's say, and I were to go and try to use his tactics and ask what's the evidence that you have that the laws apply to me just because I'm physically in the state of New York, right?
Sure.
If I were to say that, what could they do? Just like hold me in contempt or something? What would they do?
No, they would then, if the state's ready to do it, they would just come back and say, okay, we have this proof. They bring up the officer. Did you, what's your name, officer, blah, blah. Did you see, where were you on this certain day? I was blah, blah, blah. Then, okay, did you see this person at this place on that day? Yes, right? And now you have a witness who's brought in evidence that this person was within the jurisdiction. That's what they'd have to do. But again, that comes into play. What if the cop doesn't show, right? Boom. That happens sometimes where, the police just don't show, and then, okay, well, guess what? There goes their case. There goes the evidence they were going to bring in, and now...
Well, I think what he's referring to is he's not even like going to the... he's not even making the assertion of whether the client is guilty or not guilty. He's like, we're not even talking about that. We're just saying, does the law apply to my client, right? So disregarding even if the police officers did see you speeding or not, we're talking about the law itself, right?
Right.
Not whether you broke this arbitrary law.
Right. and chances are, the thing is that the state could probably prove that in their defense. They probably, they could, but are they prepared to do that? Possibly not. Because they're not used to seeing somebody actually argue all the way down that they legally could. Yeah. Is the judge feeling like doing that or feeling like getting out for lunch? Again, do you want to deal with someone who has a $75 ticket, or do you want to get out for lunch in 15 minutes? Do you want to, have someone in this court arguing for an hour or two, or do you want to say, okay, it's costing us $500 an hour to be here, let's get this guy out of here, next person, they've learned their lesson, we're done.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like if I haven't gone to court in many years, but if
That's
I do,
good. Stay away.
Yeah, but if I do, I'm thinking about like should I actually attempt to use his tactics by myself? Is that wise?
I mean, I don't know. That's something, I don't know what jurisdiction you're in, but that's something I personally, even I have tons of legal knowledge having been in law school. Not that that means anything, because every lawyer is doing research every time they get something handed to them. I know enough to know that I wouldn't be sure. I'd have to do a lot of work and research to know what I'm preparing to do. Mm-hmm. And, if I was in your position, I'd definitely be spending a lot of time watching other attorneys handle similar cases. I'd go in there, I'd take notes on what the attorneys are doing, what they're saying, what's working, what's not working. I'd take that back and use that as a basis for research. And a lot of attorneys do that who are learning too. They go and they watch other attorneys who are seasoned, watch what the judges or the police or the prosecutor trips up on, takes note on that, and goes back and does some research.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Like when I was in I was in college in, let's say, 2003. I got a ticket, like, because it was like a 2-hour parking, and mm-hmm. they thought I parked more, but I didn't. I just went to take a final and came back, parked in the same place, and they didn't realize it. They gave me a ticket, right? But I thought it was interesting. I'm like, all right, cool. I get to see what the justice system is like.
Yeah,
so I thought it was interesting. I went there, I saw the judges and everything. Of course, I never knew about any of this stuff, voluntarism or anything. I just thought it was interesting stuff, but now I can have a completely different slant to it. So, because you have this idea of authority, like these people, they come in and everyone has to stand up, right? It's
yeah, I can't stand it. I mean, I was at jury duty the other day. I'm glad I got out of that. I said all the right things I needed to say, apparently.
So you were discarded, you mean?
Yeah, and it wasn't a case where it was like a victimless crime either. So, it wasn't like, oh, I can't wait to help nullify, this law. It was like violent crimes against a specified victim who was a minor. Oh. Not really the best case. I mean, yeah, he could have been innocent, but that's not really something to get in there and be like, oh yeah, I can't wait to nullify this law. The anti-robbery law, the anti-you can't steal children law.
Oh, shoot.
So there was no horses in the race for me in that one.
Yeah, I got a summons for jury duty also in the mail, and I looked at it and it said by law you must provide this information. I'm like, you know what? No, I don't want to. Yeah. I just didn't want to. I'm like, maybe if they said please, right, I might have done it. But I don't know. And then a lot of my friends online, they're like, you should have did that. You could have nullified something. I'm like, I just don't like that tone that the state has. They just treat you like subjects, right? Like serfs, right?
Yep.
So,
and the funny part is when you get there, they try to laud you and say, "Oh yeah, you're doing your civic duty. You're such a great, help to this country, and we need you." And they try to make it seem like as if, "Oh, this is your choice," or that you're not going to get thrown in a cage if you decide not to come. Like they always try to psychologically manipulate people, and it drives me bonkers. That's why, I try to stay away from that as much as I can.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of Marc Stevens was telling me he was in court. And he was talking to this one witness, and he asked the witness, "Are you here of your own free will?" And the witness says, "Of course, and I'm here because I want to be here." Mm. And he's like, "I'm sorry, is this your name on the subpoena?"
Right.
She's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I'm confused. You just said that you're here of your own free will, but it says here you're forced to be here." By law, right? Yeah. Like, the witness just committed perjury. How can we take anything that this witness says with any truth?
It's a funny thing, but it's 100% true. He is right on that. You got a witness to perjure themselves, and not only that, you can bring in bias. Why is this witness here? Why are they forced to be here? How does it make them feel? What are they saying, and why are they saying it? Are they just saying it because they just want to be out of here already because they just got subpoenaed? Those are legitimate ways you can attack a witness's credibility. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the stuff that I really love about what he does. Is he exposes the gun in the room, the element of force.
Right. That's great.
That the state, always uses to do whatever. It's nothing about the state is brilliance, elegance or gentleness, right?
Sure. I mean, I'm fine with that too. Even though it might not necessarily have a outcome that he wants, the fact that he goes in there and makes people face the crap that they're sitting in is just a nice experience. Making them have to admit who pays your check. Oh, the state. The judge is paid by the state. The prosecution. Who are you paid by? The state. So isn't there a conflict of interest, right? Yeah. Obviously, from a legal norm, they're going to say no. But to make them have to face that reality, it definitely, I think, stirs some thoughts in people's heads, especially if they're watching. Maybe they're in the audience they're watching, or maybe there's other witnesses, and they're like, huh, that's a good point. Even though it's not going to change anything, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's exactly why I think he does a lot of this stuff, is for the
Yeah.
people that are watching, that, it plants some seeds in some people, and hopefully
Yeah.
gets them to think, if if perhaps it goes right over the judge and the prosecutor.
Yeah.
That's all we can hope for, right? Just to plant some seeds everywhere we go, like
Exactly.
little Johnny Appleseed, right?
Absolutely. I agree with you.
So how do
100%.
you discuss voluntarism and anarchy with people that you encounter? Like, do you try to bring it up when
Sure.
you, like, how do you approach it? What's your method?
I usually just approach it like a very conversational way. I had a student just ask me today, "What's voluntarism?" Apparently, they were googling me and somehow found that. So I just said, voluntarism means maximizing consent and minimizing the initiation of violence. And he's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "What does that mean?" I'm like, "Well, just maximizing consent. Like, think about it like this: if I came in your room when you weren't there and I cleaned it, and you're like, 'Yeah, that's great. I cleaned your room.' But you didn't ask for it, and I'm like, 'Hey, you owe me $50. You'd be like, whoa, I didn't agree to that.' I'm like, 'Yeah, that's it.' I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want people doing stuff without my permission." And they start to click. I go with a very just simple conversational thing. No need to get political. No need to go into like left-right paradigm stuff. Just talk about how you would feel. If you talk about how you would feel if somebody did that to you, people can start to say, "Oh, I see what you're saying now. Okay, I guess I wouldn't really like that, would I?" And then, of course, if they start asking more questions and they go down the rabbit hole, but what about this? What about that? But
And what about your family? How do they approach your ideas?
overall, pretty
Around this?
chill. Yeah, I have it pretty easy because my mom's libertarian. My dad's like paleo conservative. Like, I don't know. I reach him. He understands it. He likes it. He even supports my work. But sometimes, he gets caught up a little bit from religious reasons, you could say. My younger brother, super libertarian. Younger sister is like slightly libertarian. So even older sister's libertarian. So, and I would say I did influence all their thoughts as time progressed. I'll take credit where it's due.
Nice.
But overall, I don't have to deal too much with like, oh yeah, you have the super leftist parents, you have the super conservative parents kind of thing, where it's the political side is so ingrained.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually have real conversations with them about these things. It's nice.
Wow, it's a lot nicer position than me. I grew up in a fiercely democratic family.
Okay.
And my mother calls herself a socialist today, which which I don't really tell her that in my circles that's considered an insult.
Does she say that with knowing like what she's asking for, like what it means? Does she know what socialism means?
I think I always remember the quote that the people who want socialism are the people who have not experienced it. Who have not lived through it, right? Like my wife, she grew up in communist Romania.
Wow.
And she grew up. She was born in '82, and then the revolution happened in '89. The dictator was overthrown, and there's a little. I guess capitalism started coming in. It started getting more channels, more variety of things. But being a young girl, she didn't really experience that much of it. Like kids don't really experience the brunt of whatever kind of regime is in power. It's more the adults, I think. Kids have fun wherever they are. Basically they adapt, right? I think it's more the adults that suffer. So it's her mother that really was impacted by that. Grew up and had to experience all the all the restrictions of private enterprise and things like that.
Sure.
But yeah, I firmly believe that it's only the people that have not experienced it that advocate something like that, because and also if you don't know what the term democide means, then of course then you haven't experienced communism or socialism, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say I agree with you in terms of what has been historical practice. Of course, people who hold socialism up in the philosophical sense will say it's a little bit different than its practice, or communism, they'll say it's different. But what comes down is those core elements of what makes a human in terms of how they live. And for me, that's how I begin my philosophical journey with voluntarism: is what is the nature of being human, and in terms of needs, fulfilling those base needs to survive. I think it's really hard to define a philosophy without starting at the actor.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're right. I think they get confused. They think socialism it's just being social, right? And communism is like
sharing is caring.
It's like community, right? We're just share. Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of idyllic senses about that without the human incentives.
Yeah, exactly. Absent human incentives. As long as you have the right dictator in power, everything will be fine. Right?
Sure.
Right?
Or the right education.
Or the right education, or the right healthcare, or the right, whatever.
Right.
So tell everyone, where they can find your work. Like websites,
Sure.
Facebook page.
Absolutely. Main website for Voluntaryists is volcomic.com. That's V as in victory, OLCOMIC. So VOL, comic.com. That's where the main stage is for the comic series as far as updates. Facebook, we have a great page there, over 1,000 likes, which is awesome. Just recently hit that mark, so that's great. Facebook.com/volcomics, so it's volcomic with the S, the plural. YouTube, got videos there. It's where we post all of our teasers and updates for video-related things and promoting the campaign. So it's youtube.com/the Voluntaryists. And now, of course, we're on Indiegogo. So if you go on Indiegogo, it's a long URL, but you just go search there, Voluntaryists, or even just TSA will probably bring up the comic number one. There's not too many people who are fundraising for TSA-related things, so it comes right on up. But yeah, it's just been a wild ride and a lot of fun. And actually, first interview where I am mentioning this, I've actually just completed work on a 3D action figure prototype, a kind of a standing figure with a base for Voluntaryists, and I have that coming in for a prototype, and I'm going to see if how it came out, and then if it works, I'm going to go ahead and work from there, do more of the characters and stuff like that, because I definitely want to bring this to life as much as possible. It's a culture element. I want people to have the barrier broken down through it being a comic and entertainment kind of thing, and assuming the premises thereafter. A lot of people watch a new show because they're like, oh, this is kind of cool, there's action. They'll watch a comic movie, they'll watch, whatever it is that's more of an entertainment-related base, without thinking first, oh, what are the ethical or philosophical principles that are, within this, right? People just watch it because like, oh, this looks exciting.
Yeah.
Not because, oh, I'm going to go see Watchmen because I really have deeply thought about the philosophy and ethics before watching the movie. Most people are not thinking that. And that's the same way I want Voluntaryists to proceed, is get people just to engage it because, oh, it's a comic series, or oh, it's got like action or fighting sequences, and ooh, it's interesting. And then from there to spring in those philosophical, ethical questions that say, okay, why are they called voluntarists? Why do they want to avoid, destroying other people's property and stopping the state? What's that about? So. Yeah,
and you can definitely tell those people who don't watch, like for example, Watchmen, because they understand the philosophy when they say, no, I didn't like Watchmen. It was just a naked blue guy the whole movie. I didn't like it. My brother he's in love with that movie, and he just absolutely hates when people say that. He's like, didn't you understand what the whole movie was about?
Yeah. Haters gonna hate, so it's gonna stay. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So, you want to leave with any last message for the viewers before we go?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say, anybody who's watching this, I'd really appreciate it if at a minimum you just shared the campaign. Facebook's metrics are killer ever since they started going with like pay to play. So it's been a lot harder to get the message out. Not because people don't love it, but just because if I post something, it's reaching a small fraction, like 4% of what it used to. And so if you see this, feel free, go ahead, post the campaign link on your Facebook, your Tumblr, your YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever it is you want to use social media just to get the message out there, because it makes a big difference. And of course, if you're feeling generous, you want to contribute in any way, every dollar helps fund the campaign and push it forward. And as much money as I raise is how much I'll make the comic for. And we've never actually finished a full campaign, but it doesn't matter because I always have the materials in such a way that I can trim it and fit it to the amount that we fundraise. So it still is a solid, quality outcome on the content. I'm just always ready to adjust it depending on the fundraising size. I have a masterpiece in mind, but there's other types of mini pieces that are ready to go. So.
Cool. Awesome. You kind of sound like a master planner. I got this idea for the way society. No.
That's kind of how it goes. It's got a lot. Yeah, there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes that some people realize. If you're into business and management, you understand there's a lot of stuff that goes into the little trinkets we have, or that little poster we see, whatever type of visual arts medium you see out there. There's a lot of work that comes behind it, and the same thing goes for the comic series. So it's a hobby, but it really is a full-time hobby kind of thing.
Yeah, awesome. Looks cool. Well, you guys are doing a good job, so keep it up. people share it. That's going to be help out the cause. So awesome. So thank you for the opportunity, Jamie. So this is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network and the Conscious Resistance Network. Wishing everyone have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.